Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Human Echoes recap for Legion Season 1, Episode 3, Chapter 3. The weirdness continues, folks, with my favorite bit of weirdness definitely in this show, and possibly ever, and my favorite character so far, the Rube Goldberg talking coffee machine, who tells fairy tales relevant to the plot. Yes, please. More of that. More artificially intelligent coffee machines that may or may not exist, but holy crap are they cool. And they have little rails for their coffee cups to run on. Shoo-bam! I do want to point out, I feel like that the parable slash fairy tale that this coffee maker tells, which is, I believe, based on a real Grimm's fairy tale or something similar, is, I think, indicative of what we're going to start to see with David and his quest to find out what's going on in his memory, which goes on in this episode. The parable is about this woodcutter who frees a crane, and him and his wife living alone in the cottage, and eventually this young woman comes on a cold night, and they become friends, and she says, "Hey, I can help you guys out. I'll spin some cloth for you. Just don't look at me when I'm spinning the cloth." Like, you really don't want to see what's behind the curtain. And of course they do, and seeing what's behind the curtain ruins everything. And I think that is, again, I'm preface this right up front, I think that much of what we're seeing here is all taking place inside of David's head. And I think that that is David's subconscious warning another part of his consciousness, hey, don't go poking around as to what the nature of what this is or who you are. It's gonna be a bad time. Also, here's a cup of coffee, because I'm a talking coffee maker who tells fairy tales. Yes. Yes, 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 yes. In terms of plot development, we don't get a lot here. We get a little bit more exploration into David's memory, and we see more of these sort of glitches that are happening, things that he is keeping hidden, or some piece of him is keeping hidden, because he's clearly not doing it actively. He's not, fight. The guy says, the memory doctor says to him, "Hey, stop fighting me," but he's not, which is another clue that there is a part of his mind that can fight that isn't David. And we see skipped over bits and pieces of his memory, and we see the yellow-eyed demon starting to try to make himself known to these other people. And we get a lot more of the yellow-eyed demon, not necessarily as far as like he's doing a ton more, but I feel like we see him a lot more in this episode. We're getting more screen time with him, and I think that's significant. I think everything in this is significant. The other evidence to my theory here is the brain doctor, right? The guy who was doing the CAT scan on him, or whatever weird alternate version universe of a CAT scan this would be. In the last episode, he has his assistant that has the same name as him, and clearly at one point you just see her sort of like phase into him, like she's a part of him, or maybe she's a mutant that can phase through people. My assumption was that she was just like popping out of existence because he didn't need her at that moment. And yet, when he's in the room with David later, we absolutely see her again, and David can see her, and it's not like there's stuff going on here, is what I'm saying. This is a lot of weirdness with David's mind, but I do really enjoy some of the more metaphorical, metaphysical, meditative, I guess, aspects of this show as it goes on. Because, first of all, there's something that others have noted, and I may have mentioned earlier, but it really examines the link between memory and our perception of memory and film, right? Like the use of editing techniques and the way things are shown, the way things are cut together, is meant to mirror the idea of how the mind works. And in some cases, the way the mind works is adjusted to fit how a film edit would work. So for instance, when they're inside the memories, they'll say stop, and it pauses the movie of his memories. And you'll have cuts that happen they're just disjointed and jarring, sort of getting you in the mind space that David Haller has of not knowing what's real and where he's at and who all these people are. I think that is extra super effective, and we're getting more and more of that. The other interesting rudimentation that I think is going to start to play a bigger part if we do get this reveal, right? If we do get this reveal that these are somehow people inside of his head, he talks with Sid for a good long while about the nature of her power. And she says to him, listen, even though we swapped bodies, and I've swapped bodies with other people, I've had this power and been able to be inside of other people's bodies, I'm still me. I'm still the person I was, and there is something beyond just the brain that exists, that makes me me, that makes me a separate entity and a person that's beyond a body. And I think where this is going is that even though there are aspects of these people all sort of, again, my theory, not 100%. I feel like it's very heavily implied at this point, but not 100% confirmed, that all of these instances, or many of these instances of people, are existing inside David's brain. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're not still separate individual people with inner lives and like their own memories and things. And I don't know how that's going to work. I've actually gone and read up on some stuff from the comics about how it worked in the comics. I won't go into detail about that here for sake of possible spoilers, and also just because I want to see how it unfolds. But there is a possibility that even though a lot of this stuff is happening inside his head, that doesn't mean these aren't real personalities and people who are separate from him. So I like that. We get a lot more in depth with the memories, right? They're trying to dig into, okay, we've hit this wall. We see that there are these blocks up in your memory. We're going to try to smash them down. Again, Coffee Maker warned you not to do that. Coffee Maker, best character in the show. Don't know why you're not listening to Talking at Magic Coffee Maker, but you're going to do it. And we get up some of the creepiest, and this has been sort of not a truly horrifying experience, but definitely there are elements of, especially the first episode, that have really had a horror tone to them, sort of a vibe of, oh, this is not going to go well. The yellow-eyed demon, when he shows up, the way things are edited around him, sometimes when things go dark and David's power manifests, especially when all the walls all the doors got turned into walls, all that stuff was like messed up and weird. And but in this episode, I think, is the first one that has like real true horror, at least that kind of creeped me out, like on a real visceral level. When we go into his memories, he goes back to a memory where he's doing Halloween, trick-or-treating. He's dressed up as... What's he dressed up as, guys? Those of you who know the comics, I didn't just now realize until I thought about what that colander on his head might have been and how it links up to the comics. Not gonna... You read at your own peril. I want some of this to be a revelation to you guys if you're not already on board with everything that's happening. But I just now thought about what that colander on his head was. But he's dressed up as somebody going into this yard, chasing after, I believe it's a dog. I forgot. Anyway, and he sees in the yard the world's angriest boy in the world, which is just so messed up. That character shows up twice this episode, and I think it might be like an alternate projection of the yellow-eyed demon, although maybe they're two separate things. Or there's a lot room in David's head, from what I'm thinking is correct, for lots of different types of entities. But the world's angriest boy in the world from the book, which is, I don't know if I mentioned last week when we talked about the episode, like, who reads their kid that book? It's so messed up. It's so horrifying. I got shades of the Babadook looking at that, except maybe even more so because the Babadook felt like something that was a little bit more on the side of like, I'm going to scare you. Whereas the world's angriest boy in the world starts out like a legit kid's book. It's to the point where I Googled it. I was like, is this a real thing? And if it's not, can it be, please? Because I want to see this book realized in actual life. But you have this story about this kid who doesn't want to go to bed and cuts his mom's head off. Boy, though, I hope that's not prophetic. I don't know how that's going to play into like what actually has happened with David, but it definitely, it's a story about unchecked power, right? About this, and really, again, we have this meditation on children with power. What does that do? Because a kid, if you've read, what is the name of that short story that they adapted in a Twilight Zone episode? I can't remember. The kid basically turns into a god, but he's still essentially a child. And so his actions with how, he uses his godlike power are incredibly horrifying, because he's just, if he throws a tantrum, he can make the town wipe out from existence. Not a great thing. And you get the sense that they're maybe angling towards something like that with David. We haven't seen a lot of his childhood. We've seen some of the stuff with his father reading to him. His father's in shadow. They're going out to the observatory. Again, some great fan theories. If you want to spoil yourself for maybe what's happening next, I won't tell you, but I did like some of the fan theories about what the observatory might be. And we have this story about a boy killing his mother be in a fit of tantrum. And I wonder if that is angling towards something that David did when he was a kid in a fit of whatever this incredible power that he has was released. It's entirely possible. But regardless of that, we see the boy. We see the a live action version of this World's Angriest Boy in the world. And it just is so messed up, because you've got David as a kid being menaced by this realized version of this already terrifying children's book character. And now it's not a cartoon, which I would have loved. If it was a cartoon, like a really menacing cartoon, maybe that wouldn't have worked. But in my mind, I think that could be super cool. But it's cartoon-ish. It's this sort of paper mache looking head in the shape of this kid's face. And he just comes toward David, and we're snapped out of this memory again, because David's got some issues. David's hiding some stuff from himself somewhere down there deep inside. And again, you don't want to see how the cloth is made, guys. You don't want to see the goose doing her work, or the crane, or whatever she was. We get a little bit more sort of examples of David's power when they're in the memory place. They swap over to a different room. We get a little bit of backstory into who built this Summerland complex. And again, it's difficult to say if this is actually a physical place that exists, or if this is some kind of memory palace type construct in David's mind. And if so, saying that somebody specific built it, what does that mean? Maybe it's a memory that one of the personalities has of a real place that was built. Who knows? But it turns out that the Eye, our really cool looking guy with the perm and the green suit, had helped to build this place to be a refuge for kids like David, kids with powers. And it turned bad because the Eye wanted to use them for military purposes, as he does now. And in this conversation, there's an interesting little tidbit that they drop where they talk about the divisions, right? They say Division 3. And again, I'm just building this ball of yarn of my theory that this is all sort of in his head. But that specific use of the word division, I think, signals something greater in this context. I think it is being used in the sense of a military division, but I also think it's sort of a red flag saying there are divisions in this guy's mind. He is divided. And just really cool stuff. We also get some flashbacks a little bit more to David in his junkie days. David with Aubrey Plaza's character, whose name has just now escaped me, and I'm very sorry. Maybe it'll come back later. But them getting high and them sort of, I don't know, on the loose and doing their own thing. And what is that all about exactly? We see some flashes of them, cooking on this stove that she had from the previous episode. And there's a moment, right, where Tony Shalhoub's character from the previous episode, the drug dealer, you just see him flicker into another person. And I don't know what that means. I don't have the faintest clue, but it is a clue. It seems like everything in this show is a little hint of, something implying something else. And that's really cool. I really love just how deep this show goes in its sort of building of this weird, manic, crazy world. The other thing that I noticed is that there's a motif a couple of times of X's and O's, and obviously Legion is a interpretation of the X-Men character, right? And they haven't hid that. I mean, they say Marvel Television at the beginning. They talk about the X-Men. They don't talk about the X-Men in this show, but I'm saying like it's not a secret that this is a superhero-ish kind of show. And so there were several times where David is framed with an X right behind his head, like immediately behind his head, which was interesting. The other thing that I thought was interesting as a counterpart is that the Memory Doctor is framed several times with an O, a circle directly behind his head. Maybe there's a tic-tac-toe type motif going on here. Maybe it's just saying that he's something different. He's from a different place. Maybe it's not a coincidence. I was going to say maybe it's just a coincidence. It's not. Like, everything in this was at least purposely put there. I don't know that it means something specific and concrete that you could write down and nail down and say, this is definitely what it means, but it's meant to imply something at least. And again, those little details just jazz me up so good. And to wrap everything up, we see Sid going back into David's memory one more time. They're really trying to get this breakthrough, right? They're really trying to find the moments that caused him to be what he was. And instead, Sid gets chased away by the yellow-eyed demon, chasing after David's younger self. And that sequence was pretty creepy as well, because again, you have her running like in these enclosed spaces, crawling through these ducts with this crazy bloated thing chasing after her. And in addition to that, I thought that it was preceded by a really touching moment of tenderness, because you do see her finally get to interact with David. Like, now that they're inside his memories and not real, she's able to touch him and change places with him. And she's like, she doesn't have, the power activate the way it would in the real world. Again, I'm using air quotes here, where David would swap bodies with her. And even though it's a child version of David, you really see that there's that moment of she wanted this connection, that she's needed this. And, that this is some kind of a breakthrough for her. Of course, also in this episode, David and Sid managed to project themselves trying to get to where David's sister is. And I don't know what the nature of this projection is, because they don't physically completely end up in the room. They're sort of hologram-ish type things, but they see what's going on with her. And we have, at the very beginning of the episode, you have the eye saying over and over, "Shall we begin? Shall we begin? Shall we begin?" And there's also an echo of that with the coffee maker at the start, where they repeat the same story. You almost get the sense that there is a running iteration of whatever these sequence of events are keeps getting reset because of something. And I don't know what that something is, but David does try to go and save his sister. Apparently the things in the water are leeches. I don't know leeches are gross. I don't know that they're the most effective torture mechanism, but maybe I'm wrong. And also it's, weird sort of suggestive stuff, so it may not even be worth exactly examining that specifically. But in the scenes where his sister's being interrogated, the older, I would say he's a general, but I actually don't know. My brain just substituted that he was some kind of military figure, confronts his sister and with a really interesting question, where he says, "Listen, you knew there was something different about David. You knew he wasn't just crazy, because you've seen him activate these powers before, haven't you?" And I don't know where that's leading exactly. It would be interesting if she has allowed herself to believe something that's not true about David to cover up if she has some kind of mental block that she's put in place, or someone else has put in place so she didn't think about it. Oh, I didn't even think about that. Okay. Yes. Anyway, David gets caught by the Eye. The Eye sees him, which, you know, makes sense. That's what he's called. He's called the Eye. And they, you know, the woman who's the director of Summerland says to him, listen, you can't go back because that next time they'll be expecting you, and next time they'll catch you. And I don't know what that means. I don't know exactly what it means to catch David in that circumstance because he wasn't fully physically there. And I don't know what any of the ground rules are for that. But you do also have him sort of interacting with Aubrey Plaza's character, and Aubrey Plaza telling him, hey, this, like, just because these people look nice and seem like they have your interest at heart, maybe you don't trust them 100%. Maybe they're not perfect and wonderful, and you should back off a little bit because they might be pushing you down a path you don't want to go, maybe possibly inadvertently. And it's interesting. We definitely know that Aubrey Plaza's character is not real. I mean, she's 100% dead now, and she's in his memory. And to see her warning him off about these other pieces of himself, theoretically, I keep expecting them to reveal this. I hope it's not like the very end of the show that we get this sort of all explained to us, but I'm enjoying the ride regardless. But she sort of warning him off about these other people who are telling him not to go and to stay and to dig into his past. And she kind of gives an alternate version of the warning that the coffee maker gives and says, hey, maybe digging around in your memories is not where you want to be going, dude. You're going to find some stuff that you did not want to know. I want to know. I sure do want to find out what's going on with this character and all these weird characters that are around him. But we're going to have to wait till next week to do that. Thank you guys so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you like this video and you want to see more like it. We'll be doing these every week. Leave a comment. I would love to hear what you guys' theories are about what's going on. I miss things a lot, and I'm not a genius. I understand that there are some things that I skip over, and I absolutely appreciate anything that you guys can add to my knowledge or theories you'd like to bring up. That's always fun. Do that in the comments, and I will see you guys next week with another episode of the Legion Recap.